All right, now here's what I'm going to do. I need, these two girls are going down there, right there, right there, right there. Come back up here. Yep, you, I can't see, I just saw two girls. That's good. Okay. Now, these girls are going to take another offering, but they are limited. Come around here and turn around so everybody can see you. Smile at them. They're limited. If you were here when I did this last time, no $100 bills, please. We don't want any $100 bills. We don't want any 50s, 20s, 10s, or 5s. But we want at least 30 ones. And you girls' job is to go collect $1 bills. And I will start. I've only got one $1 bill. I put my other money in the alabaster offering. But you guys, you go that way and collect $1 bills, and you go that way and collect $100 bills. And just $1 bills.
Missed him over here.
And I see a few more children, so I think I'm hoping we get more than 30, which you guys look like you're doing now. Oh man, you guys need to, you know what? They need to take the offering every week. What have we been doing wrong? All right. Whoa. Money from heaven. Oh, look at this stack. I don't know how many's there, but it looks like a lot. All right. You can have a seat. Thank you. I appreciate that. Oh, man, look at this. Now, some of you might not even remember what we're doing, but Angel, I don't know if you did this before. Okay, maybe we didn't do it here, but she's the keeper of the money. And now on my last Sunday, I'm actually calling her Angel instead of Angela, or April. See, I can't remember what I called her wrong. Okay, here's the thing, kids. Angel is the keeper of the money, and let me see. Jason, I need you to appoint 2 teenagers to be the keeper of the words. And then you need to check their work. Now here's how it works. All the kids, grade school and down, who are here, you have to keep track of how many times I say a word in the sermon. And the word is look, or something that includes look, like looking. And then at the end of the message, I will have Jason confer with his teams who he has designated to be the official word keepers. And we'll find out how many times I said the word look, and we'll probably average it out between the 3 of you, Jason and the 2 teams. Go ahead, Jason, get your workers. Now, you guys need paper and pencil? Got it, all right. I think she wanted to do that. All right, and if you're near a child, you're going to help them. Give them a piece of paper and a pencil, and you might have to share those around, because if you're like me, you'd never carry a pen, because why would you? You have an iPhone that you can write in, right? Okay, so spread that around. Now you got to, I'll tell you when to start, by the way. You're looking for the word look or looking. And every time I say that, just put a slash. And adults, you can help them, to understand that 5-slash thing. Because that way it's a whole lot easier to count than, a bunch of slashes. And you probably already realize that I'm going to use that word a lot. Look and looking. All right. Now, it hasn't started yet. I'll get to that in a moment. This is our last Sunday here, and it's kind of, in some ways, it's really difficult for us because we've grown very fond of you. And I have learned to appreciate you, and I speak highly of you often. this week we were at a conference in West Virginia, and we were supposed to talk about things that our churches were doing in the area of compassionate ministry. And I was naming off all the things that you do. So I claimed you as my church for a while, but now I'm going to pass you off to somebody else. And the role of the interim is like a foster parent. You know, you have someone for a while, and then you turn them over to somebody else. And the good side of that is we know lots of people because we've done this lots of times. It'll be quite a while before I get a chance to do this again. I've been doing it for about 2 years straight, and last winter when I was in the hospital, they told me that the school, Mount Vernon Nazarene University, said that there'd come a time when they'd like me to take on some additional responsibilities. You know what that means. More work, no increase in pay, right? Okay. And so I said, well, give me some time because it was going to involve some travel and some additional travel and some out on weekends. I said, give me some time to see where we're at with Highpoint. And finally we decided that I probably need to get on with that. Now, I'm not going to do that right away because well over a year ago, I bought some tickets to the President's Cup, which is next week. And so I'm going to be out there with some of my friends at the President's Cup. Look for me. I don't know where I'll be, but look for me on TV. So I keep telling them at the office, you know, I'm not available next week. I'm not answering my phone. I'm not coming in. I'm not, you know, and they still were scheduling things. I said, no, you can go in my place because I'm not going to be there. I'm going out to the President's Cup. Now, how many of you have no idea what the President's Cup is? Okay, I kind of thought that. Well, there's this huge golf tournament in your backyard. It's next week. And it's the thing where they bring in the 12 best international players and the 12 best players from the United States, and they go head-to-head for a week at your field. So I'll be there, as well as 50,000 other people. They have sold all the tickets, and you can't get in. And I'm not giving you mine, so you just have to watch. But it is with difficulty that we leave, because we have really grown to appreciate you. You have some incredibly strong people who are part of your body. And they are in all ages. They run all ages. The board, in my opinion, I have seen them become new level leaders. I think they were always good, but during this transition they've become new level leaders. The level that they were on was good, and where they're at is even stronger. Prayer has become very much a part of who they are. I feel very comfortable with the board. They have carried a lot of weight, and they've carried a lot of extra burdens. And they worry sometimes, and they pray sometimes, but they're a very good group. But they're really just a reflection of a lot of the people here. And you say, well, okay, if we're that good, how come we haven't gotten a pastor yet? And I would echo that sentiment, except that as I do, the Holy Spirit checks me. And I hear the Spirit in my heart saying, whose church is this? It's still God's church. And so it'll be good. It'll be okay. And now you can start with that word. And the word was? Or? Okay. I mean, every time. In knowing that this was going to be my last sermon, I thought about the things that I have probably said this year. I heard somebody when I was right out of college. It was a tape that was sent to me, and the person speaking said, you know, pastors really only don't have very many messages. They just say it a bunch of ways. And I thought, well, that's not true. Because at that time, I knew how many messages I had. I had 13. And but as I went on and as I became a pastor and began to speak, I found that I really don't have very many messages. I just say them the same different ways. But so this is kind of of my messages that you've probably heard me say, and there's a story behind this. When I was 22, I was called to a church that I was really excited about. It was a great church. It was a church that I had wanted to pastor while I was in college, and I couldn't believe that I was actually going to get a chance to. There's a church up by Akron. It's called Doylestown, Church of the Nazarene. Probably most of you don't know where that's at. It's just a little town. But they averaged 70 people in worship, and I came from small churches, and 70 was a huge church. And I was going to get to pastor this church at 22 years old, and I was really excited about it. And I came and had a good connection. When I came for the interview, I left, and I didn't know that the whole church was going to show up for the interview. That just scared me. But there was something that happened during the interview, and they knew it was right, and I knew it was right. And so I jumped in. 22 years old, going to lead this group of people. And they were some outstanding leaders, and they were people who, there was a group of guys who were about 40 at the time, and I was 22, and they became my mentors. And everything went well until after about a year, when a couple of teenage girls got into a spat. Now, my wife tells me, she told me then, you just don't understand how teenage girls do. I mean, guys would go out, fight it out, be buds, come back in, have a black eye, but we'd be friends, Maybe not everybody did that, but Grover Hill, that's how we solved things. I don't know if they did that in Paulding or not, but that's right, okay. But she said, girls are different. They kind of hold on to grudges as a teenager. I said, well, I don't understand that. But these girls were upset about something. And then guess what? Their moms got involved. And I'm going, just give it a rest, And then their moms dragged their husbands into this. And then, I don't know, before long, people begin to say, well, this girl should have done this, and this girl should have done this. And all of a sudden, we were running 70 and growing a little bit, and all of a sudden we're running 60 and 65 and 55 and 50. And in that process, they said they wanted to build a new building, and we had this Sunday where they pledged all kinds of money, and they'd given it in 3 months, and we were out looking for money to borrow money because it was just a small town and no local banks, and we had an architect, and the attendance was going down. And we just weren't getting anywhere that a bank that would loan us any money, and I'm thinking, that's great. Because I don't want to build now. I mean, man, there's problems here. I don't want to get involved in this. And I was at camp, and I was directing camp that year. It was the first year I directed camp. And the architect tracked me down and said, I've got great news. Good. He says, we've got you the money. And I said, oh, wow, that's great. And that was in August. And I wasn't excited at all, but I realized that I had to deal with it. So I called one of those 40-year-old guys named Jim Ison, and I said, Jim, on Sunday, because I'd planned to be gone for a week after camp. I was going to go off on vacation. I made a little bit of a change. And I said, Jim, I'll be back next Sunday, but this Sunday, tell everybody that we've got something to celebrate. And just get everybody you can out to church next Sunday. And so I went away for a week and changed our plans. And Kenna and our son, who was just a little baby at that time, went to spend time with my parents. And I got in their travel trailer on a deserted campground and spent all week just with myself and God and reading some books and reading the Bible. And I thought, I need to change the way I think, because I found that I was giving up pretty easily. And I was willing to walk away from things pretty easily. And I was sometimes overwhelmed with the negativeness of things. And I need to change the way I think. And so I spent that whole week allowing God to reprogram my heart and mind. And out of that, some things begin to change in my mind. And the church, by the way, I don't know what Jim Eisen said, but the next Sunday they had 90 in attendance when I got back. And he never got below that again, as long as I was there. They went a lot higher again. But that was a lot because of those 40-something folks who did incredible things, and I just kind of caught a hold of them. But what happened to me by that week was, here's some of the things that God just drilled in. He said, he says, the very first thing you have to do is love God and love people. And I know that, and you know that. But I wanted to own that. I wanted to own that. Where love God and love people. And I wanted to not make that a saying. I wanted to make that the way that I really live. And then I realized that love is a choice. You have to choose every day to love God, and you have to choose every day to love people. Because God is always lovable, unless he seems absent, and then he's not so lovable. And people, well, they're lovable 7 or 8 hours a day when you're sleeping. It's real easy. But other times, you have to choose. And so that was part of what began to become a part of this. And another thing that came into my thought process, and it's worked its way into my heart, is 3 words: love, acceptance, and forgiveness. It's the foundation of every good relationship. I've got to love people. I've got to accept them for who they are without trying to reshape them, and then accept and then forgive them for when they fail. And then, and I know I've said this, look for the best, forget the rest. That's something that I literally, after that week, I had to make myself do. When I meet somebody, the first thing I do is say, I like this person. And I start to look what's right about them. Now, I'll tell you later, it doesn't always work, but I do my best. And then I came to the conclusion that if I keep noticing the worst about a person, I need to keep looking until I get something good. By the way, did I say look before? Yes. See, I said looking, and that counted as 1. And then I said look, and that counted as 1. And then I asked you, so, you're catching on. Another thing I came to recognize sometime around that time was to pursue excellence. And excellence is doing what you have to do when you have to do it, whether you feel like it or not. And I have lots of work to do on that. Because the older I get, sometimes the less I feel like it. This one took me a while, but it came out of that week. Lighten up. Don't take yourself so serious. Guess what? You have strengths and weaknesses, and so does everyone else. So when somebody upsets you, don't take it so personal. Just lighten up. And don't be so hard on yourselves. We're all weak. We're all strong. And it's just a lot easier if we just lighten up. And then this one. This is what I'm going to speak to you about this morning. Always look up. Always look up. Don't look around. In other words, keep your eyes on God, not on people or situations. Always look up. Now, I would like to say that I have those 100% of the time. And I don't think that's true. I don't even know what percentage I have. I know that I don't have it near 100%. That idea of looking up, always looking up. Keep our eyes on God and not on circumstances or people. And that's what I want to talk to you about. In Psalms 106, in verse 12 and 13, the psalmist is telling the story of the deliverance of the children of Israel from the Red Sea. And just to refresh your memory, Moses had gone in and led the people out who were slaves. There were millions of them. And they came to the Red Sea, and it was like a giant barricade, because how are they going to get across it? The army of Egypt was behind them, the Red Sea was in front of them, and Moses felt like they ought to step out into the sea, and when he did, the waters parted and they walked across on dry land. Now, that happened a long time before this psalm, and the psalmist was just recounting it, telling the story again. And so it starts off, verse 12. Then the Israelites believed God's promises and sang God's praise after they had crossed the Red Sea. You know what they did? They chose to look up. They got across the sea and they said, wow, God, you are incredible. They just looked up. They didn't look around, didn't see Egypt. They didn't see the desert. They didn't see the fact that they didn't have homes. They looked up and they saw God and you said, God, you are incredible. Let's go on to the next verse. But they soon forgot what he had done and did not wait for his counsel. They started looking around. And that is probably pretty typical. Wow, God! And then we look around and go, we got to figure this out ourselves. Where before, you can guide us. Well, we got to figure this out. So it goes back and forth in lives. And I found a chapter in Matthew chapter 9, that has a bunch of stories of Jesus and people interacting with Jesus. And when I looked at it from this idea of looking up, I thought, wow, there's a lot of stuff here. A lot of little stories. So I'm going to give you these stories. They talk about looking up or looking around. The first one is from Matthew chapter 9, verse 2. And in here, we're going to see people who looked around, and they were looking through a lens of envy or jealousy. Okay? It says, some men brought to Jesus a man who was paralyzed, lying on a mat. When Jesus saw the faith of the friends, he said to the man, take heart, son, your sins are forgiven. At this, some of the teachers of the law said to themselves, this fellow is blaspheming. And then it goes on, and Jesus read their minds. I've always found it interesting that we forget that Jesus reads our minds. But Jesus read their minds and knew what they were thinking. And he said, so that you'll know who I am, because it's easier to say your sins are forgiven than to get up, rise up and walk. I'll just say rise up and walk, and that's what he did to this guy who was lame, and the guy walked. But I want to look at the, what do they call them in this? The teachers of the law. The teachers were envious of all the attention Jesus was getting. And what did they do when they became envious? They found fault. Now sometimes, if we find ourselves finding fault with people over and over and over, it might just be a certain person, we need to ask ourselves, are we looking at people or are we looking at God? And envy is something that is so subtle, jealousy is right along with that. We think those are things for people who are much different than us. But it affects all of us. Envy and jealousy. It affects pastors. And it all comes because we're looking at what the attention somebody else is getting, or what somebody else has that we don't have. And we know that we deserve as much as the other person. Because we've done a lot, but nobody's looking at us. And we're looking around. The cure for finding fault with people, which often comes from a little bit of envy, is to look at that person in a brand new way. Just keep looking at them until you find a bunch of things that are right about them. Just look until you see what's right. And if somebody continually bugs you, remember how many people you bug. Just keep looking until you see something that's right, and then focus on that. The next story in Matthew 9 is about some people who were looking around, and they had an attitude of pride. They weren't looking up, they were looking around. Starts in verse 11. When Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and it says, quote, sinners, I'm sorry, we're on the next one. It says, sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? See, they put tax collectors and sinners all in the same phrase. And maybe you feel that way too. You know, they always hire young people to go out and do the property assessments. And I have a feeling, you know, that only happens once every few years, so it's a temporary job. I have a feeling they don't ever want to do that job again. When somebody knocks on your door and says, I need to take a look and see, is this right? Is this right? Is this right? Yep, that's right, that's right. No, we changed this. What's going to happen? Are my taxes going to go up? How many of you look and say, are my taxes going to go down? So tax collectors and sinners. What the Pharisees had was a sense of pride that caused them to look around at people and say, I'm so glad I am not like them. I am so glad I'm not like them. I think I might have told you about the lady in the grocery store with Ken, and I don't remember exactly. She'll have to tell me the whole story later, but it was something like this about our son, when he was a couple of years old, was giving a hard time in the cart, you know. And this lady said something like, well, you know, we really have to control our children. And it ended up that she was in front of Kenna when she was checking out, and I think her kid reached in, maybe grabbed something, I'm just going to say, maybe like eggs, dropped them, and Kenna bit her tongue. But what did she want to say? We really have to control our kids. We really have to control our kids. That's what she wanted to say. And this woman in the grocery store was taking a little bit of pride in my kids not like yours. That's what we're talking about. Where we take pride that we're not like you, or our kids aren't like your kids. And the problem with that is it makes you superior in your mind in that area, and other people inferior. And that's an unholy pride. It comes from looking around. And now we do that at times. That's something that I still do, and I hate to go listen to preachers sometimes, because sometimes I start to compare myself. Oh, I would have never said it that way. Oh, I never thought of that. That's looking around and having a sense of pride. I'm a little bit better than you. I'm looking to see how I'm better. And what it causes us to do sometimes is to not accept people who are not like us. They're not as good as us. They're not like us. And the cure is to learn to accept people the way they are and learn to like them for who they are. Doesn't mean you condone sin. I have met some people who have a lot of sin in their life who are a lot of fun. I like them. I like them. I can joke with them. I've met some who I can talk serious with. But if my attitude was, you're a sinner. So, when you find yourself feeling a little bit superior, because you've looked at somebody better than they are, learn to accept them for who they are, and find that you really do like them. There's another group in this next passage, all of Matthew 9. This is John's disciples. Verse 14, John's disciples came and asked Jesus, John the Baptist's disciples, the cousin of Jesus, how is it that we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? Jesus answered, how can the guest of the bridegroom mourn while he's with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast. What they were doing was looking around at what other people of the same faith were doing. They were all followers of God. And they were saying, they don't go like we do. And what they had done was they had elevated the way they did things to a moral issue. A moral issue is having to do with right and wrong. It's always right and it's always wrong. That's what a moral issue is. And so they had elevated their practice of fasting to a moral issue. And if you don't fast as much as we fast, you are morally wrong. That's what they were doing. And what Jesus said was, now fasting's important, but you don't have to do it the same way, the same time, to make it right. Fasting is important, but don't feel like you have to do this. And we let this slip into the church sometimes. We let this slip into the church sometimes. And even though we can be very accepting of others who are outside the family of God, sometimes in the family of God, of the same faith, we let this slip in, and we elevate our preferences to moral issues, right and wrong. And we just don't see how you can do that. It's not right. Why? Because it's not. Why? Because it's always been wrong. Why? That's what my son used to do. I used to hate it. He used to hate that one three-letter word. Why? And then I'd resort to the wisdom of all fathers, because I said so. But why? Why? Because it's the way you do things. But is it a moral issue? And the way that we've seen this in recent years, and I think it's disappearing now, so we can talk a little bit about it as music. I think that's disappearing now. And I still love the picture. I can see it in my mind. It's this red marquee. Yellow marquee. You know those yellow marquees that you go out and put out, and you can buy them at Sam's. This church, not far from here, about an hour away from here. I love it. I love going by their signs because they give me a chuckle. But this one said, "We still use the hymnal." Moral issue. They had said it is morally wrong not to use the hymnal. So what about people who can't read? What about people who can't read? Oh, well, that's an exception. I just love that sign. We still use the hymnal. I used to think about people who didn't go to church who read that sign, if they read the sign, what they thought a hymnal was. I have no idea how they interpreted that. They probably didn't give it a second thought. But what they were doing was it was code to anybody who was going to church who had gone to the PowerPoint. You want to come to a church that's really right? Come to ours, because we still use the hymnal. And that's what I'm talking about. Anytime that we take and see, they really believe it was a moral issue. But whenever we take our things, our preferences, and we say, this has to be right for everybody, what we're doing is we're looking around and we're comparing people. And we're giving preference to our preferences. And saying that's the way it has to be. I can remember when, the women started wearing pants to church. It didn't matter what flavor was outside, whether it was Catholic or Methodist or Nazarene. That was not allowed. Why? Because we'd never done it that way before. Okay? But it's not a moral issue. So the disciples were like this and John were like this. And here's how we get over that. Here's how we cure that. Instead of giving allegiance to the method, give allegiance to the principle behind the method. What is the principle behind singing out of the hymnal? What is the principle behind PowerPoints? What is the principle behind gospel music? What's the principle behind contemporary music? The principle is worship. That's what's sacred, the principle. That's what we can moralize is the principle. Now, let's put all those people who looked around behind us and start looking at situations that looked up. First one in verse 18, we're going to see somebody who looked up and believed in the possibility of a miracle for someone that they loved. They looked up and they saw Jesus and they said, he has to help. While Jesus was saying this, having the conversation with the Pharisees of John, and the disciples of John about fasting, while Jesus was saying this, a ruler came and knelt before him. Did you catch the two incongruent things in that? A ruler knelt. Now, what would make a ruler kneel? He knelt before him and said, my daughter has just died. Come and put your hand on her and she will live. He was looking up to God for a miracle, for someone that he loved. I don't know of anything that moves me more to God than the pain of people I care about. You know what I'm talking about? Especially if you're a parent. Nothing moves you more to look up to God than the pain of those that you love. See, this was a ruler. Most of the rulers, we've talked about it, the Pharisees, the teachers, the rulers, they didn't want anything to do with God, or Christ, I'm sorry. They wanted everything to do with God as they knew him, but Christ didn't fit that picture. They didn't want anything to do with him until someone they loved couldn't make it without him. They looked up. I think if we have the habit of looking for miracles, we will see more miracles. Now, sometimes when we come to God and say, God, can you touch this person? I really care about him. Sometimes God heals them. And sometimes the healing doesn't take place until life ends. Does that mean that I stop looking to Jesus for miracles? No, in fact, I think the more you look for miracles, the more miracles you find. I was in this conference yesterday and Friday in Ripley, West Virginia, and it was about Appalachian ministries and things. And this one pastor was telling a story of something called the Church Without Walls. And the community churches had gathered together. There was a place where homeless people lived in their town. And every Saturday, a church would go out and hold service. They would start with a hot meal, invite everybody to have a hot meal, and then they would have service, and then they would send them home with a bagged lunch. And this particular pastor, they involved the whole church. Their Saturday was the fourth Saturday of every month. And on the Wednesday before that, they would involve the whole church in preparing the meals and in praying for those who went out on Saturday. And the youth pastor went out after his teens had helped prepare the meals, and he went out that Saturday. And at the close of the service, somebody who came up to him and said, "Could you pray for me? I've got a lead on a place to live, and I really need it. Could you pray for me?" And the youth pastor said, "Yeah." So he prayed for him right then. And then immediately after the prayer, the person's phone rang. They have a program that people who don't have homes can still get a phone. It's a government-sponsored program. This guy's phone rang. He picked it up and was yes. Yes? Great! And you know what happened? The housing lead was confirmed. Coincidence or miracle? The truth is, when you look for more miracles, you find more miracles. And sometimes the condition of those that we love causes us to look to Christ. But not only the condition of those we love, sometimes when we find ourselves in our own worst possible circumstances. Verse 20, Just then, a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind Jesus and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, if only I touch this cloak, I will be healed. The man came for his daughter. She came for herself. Both of them looked up towards Jesus. And both of them, the message is the same. If you want to see more miracles, look for them. They're all around us. And sometimes we don't even notice them. And sometimes people say, well, you're just being silly. You can't count everything that's a coincidence as a miracle. I don't say that's true. But is it a coincidence that they prayed and the phone rang? Maybe, I don't know. Believe what you want. I'd rather look to God and believe that there are miracles. And that takes us to the third person. Two guys. We learned to look up and found that the way they have always been is not the way they always have to be. Verse 27. Jesus went on from there, where this woman touched him. Two blind men followed him, calling out, have mercy on us, son of David. When he had gone indoors, the blind men came to him, and he asked them, do you believe that I'm able to do this? Yes, Lord, they replied. And he touched their eyes and said, according to your faith it will be done to you. And their sight was restored. Look up to God and believe that what you are is not what you always have to be. I don't know if these guys were born blind or blinded, but they thought they were always going to be blind. And some of you have faced things that have colored your outlook on life. It made you susceptible to things like anger, and being negative, lack of trust. Don't believe God cannot work in you to change that. Look to him. Look around all your circumstances. You can't change. Keep looking to him. The irony is every situation presents us an opportunity to look up or to look around. Let's go on in Matthew 9 to verse 32. While they were going out, after healing the blind man, a man who was demon-possessed and could not talk was brought to Jesus. And when the demon was driven out, the man who had been mute spoke. The crowd was amazed and said, nothing like this has ever been done in Israel. What were they doing? They were choosing to look up. But the Pharisees said, it's by the power of the demons that he drives out demons. They were choosing to look around. It's always a choice. Look up and look around. If I could just pass on anything, I would say look up. I used to sign my letters for years and years and years. Always look up. And I changed it about 5 years ago because I realized I was preaching with everybody with every letter. Okay, always look up. I changed it to looking up because I'm trying to do it too. I want to have prayer for you. And then, as of now, stop the count. I'm going to have prayer. And I'm going to ask Jason and the teens to come up here and kind of figure out what we've got. And we'll get that report. And then afterwards, Jason's going to talk. Jason has an announcement he needs to make. And I'll let him make that. And then after that, we'll dismiss. And the kids come back and bring your papers with you. And we'll divide up Angela, April, I know. You can tell us how many we have, and then kind of divide that after all the kids are up here, and we'll see how many each one gets. And then, kids, you certainly don't have to do this. But if you get more than you thought you were going to get, There's nothing as exciting as sharing. And you might want to drop something now. Don't have to. But if you want to, keep some for yourself. But there's nothing more fun than sharing. So let's have prayer. And then Jason and your crew, if you'll come up. Lord, I want to thank you for giving us something that is so incredible that it can change our mind and our hearts instantly when we look at you. And Lord, thank you for understanding when we look around. You don't cast us out. You just get our attention. I thank you for this church. I ask your blessings upon them. In your precious name we pray. So Jason, you and your crew come up here and get together and figure it out. And tell us how many we have. And kind of confer with those two and see what the average is. And then I'm going to let every kid on a big secret. Go ahead and tell us how many you had. How many times did you have?
71 or 75?
77, 75? Okay. Now, how many adults kept track of that? See, I ought to do this just for the adults. Kids, I'm going to let you in on a secret. We're going to divide the money among you no matter how many you kept. Because it's really hard to do that. And even two teams who I'm sure listen to every word of every sermon couldn't agree on the same number. So we'll do that.